So yeah, just for contextualize, so Alex Senderov is it's retired engineering mostly, but with a lot of other kind of activities, and he has been an author of a book. You can say marginal book, so it's not. I'm not talking here about academic book or even a bestseller in the sense of selling, reaching everyone, but it's. He approached me and we joined into this kind of collaboration. And here I'll actually talk more from my perspective. So I really, he is not present right now, so it's okay. But just keep in mind that, of course, I'm speaking more from my voice. And in his side, he has, we are perhaps the common thing that you see here, and we are both strongly that we are kind of space persons, no? So we really like certain things or certain perspectives, and even though we have ourselves our kind of differences, but you need to just understand that we have this in common, and the mathematical modeling, GBS model, etc. So here I couldn't ask for a better introduction for my own talk, because Luis has covered several concepts that I will be touching here, and I really wanted to kind of just tease around people with certain concepts, because of course we have limited time for, actually let me just reset my presentation so I really keep, no, okay, here. So basically here we will see a lot of concepts that perhaps are new. So, no, I'm not moving. It's like we're resetting the time. Sorry, I didn't explain to you. So I know more or less my time. So here I'll be, just teasing about some concepts. Some of you, or most of you, perhaps those concepts will be completely alien and will sound completely in a different language. Some others will be like you already saw in other presentations. And I'm sure, or I kind of know because I have inside information from Mario, that he will also touch or have even explained better than me, of course, other concepts related to metabolism, for example. So here you don't feel too overwhelmed, and especially please take care that I'm trying to make the effort of showing all of you or teasing your curiosity. So here we're talking about planetary humanism. As I say, I will really just define that because I don't expect you all to know even what it is. We're not talking about the theoretical term that archaeologists or perhaps even geographers or other disciplines related to that, or history has this very present. We are talking briefly because I think he's basically almost covered by now the idea of human predicament. And here, of course, I'm referring to things like Anthropocene. And then I will deal with a bit of examples about model thinking in that area or from that framework. Model thinking meaning examples of several models, mostly time models, because I don't really have time to go into complicated models, and some insights from those models into visions of the future. So in that note also, I want to just kind of bring up your minds to the question of science and activism, for example, that Luis brought it yesterday. And here you feel that, or you kind of getting the feeling that I'm actually doing a bit of activism. I just need to position you into that I am in the middle here. So I do, of course, the main intention of planetary humanism is a humanism in the sense of defending certain ideas, but it's also what I want to make clear here is that it does have presence in science, or has been developed a lot in science, much more than actually is realized or even claimed by scientists. So a brief introduction. The context of all of this, of course, is the concern that we have right now about Anthropocene, the great acceleration. We already had this mention, which really means both that we do have a lot of things out of the great acceleration. Harold also mentioned yesterday, okay, should we go back? We really like how we live, or what the things that we have. No, all of you have computers in your pockets. You are here right now, so even if you were in Essen, for example, coming here every day will be practically impossible without cars, without public transportation, etc. So we do kind of like all those things that we got, at least ourselves, and this is, we can then read the dark resources, but also, of course, the costs are very high, so we do have both environmental and social costs related to that. And the context of thinking about in terms of humanism, so the necessity perhaps of not staying only in the knowledge building and kind of trusting that people in governance or even the society in general would just listen and do their kind of jobs, whatever the jobs are. We do have like examples that things perhaps cannot really work like that. But basically here, the necessity of that comes from this situation. And here, Thomas mentioned reacceleration already at the beginning, but really here I wanted to just remind probably all of you or most of you saw this plot, which is really like an infograph. It's not necessarily about the data itself, but it's really to show the craziness of the great acceleration. So basically you have also things that we are automatically assume to be positive, other things that we kind of have a negative connotation, but it's really everything is just an explosion. And this is you can see that the scaling time is not even for archaeologists. It's like, oh, this is a couple of seconds in the archaeological history. So if you put it in archaeological scale or even geological scale, you might not even see the acceleration. So it's so fast that it has this, it's really unseen in the Earth history. So the idea here from that context is that, okay, we perhaps do need a paradigm shift, basically in the terms of, well, we can just do better. So we have a big problem in our hands, and yeah, this big problem is actually kind of our causing. We could have other problems, of course, not caused by us, but in this case, it's undeniable. This is caused by us, so we do have a responsibility towards that. And we can actually do lots of things better from what we're actually doing right now. And even though this is kind of, it's assumed to be outside ideology, but it's actually a very important point, and it's something that for sure we are not doing enough or even thinking about it enough. It's the idea that we don't really just use intelligently some resources. So we are just, we have the examples of packaging food, for example. We are investing a lot of energy, materials in certain things that we know for sure that will have very short lives. We have the idea of plastic. So in my lifetime, and I consider myself not that old, but I remember when I was a kid going with my parents to return all the glass, like in Germany, actually, it's more common. But right now, throughout the world, that is not common anymore. So it's really like something so basic, just because of the effort of a family carrying bottles to back somewhere and returning to get new bottles. That completely changed in perhaps a couple of decades. And this is something, it changes in a moment that we already have ecological, environmental impact. So we knew about those things, and still the whole system just shift towards even more problematic practices. The paradigm shift also comes, so it's not about just complaining about things that we are doing, but actually saying, okay, something that we often forget when we are talking about sustainability is that humans do have a value and should have a value for us, especially because we are the humans, in the sense of if you don't have self-confidence, at least in terms of, I do have a place in the universe, something will be wrong, so you can start. So the doomsayers, this expression that when people oppose against sustainability comes out, saying, okay, you're just either doing a drama, so then negating the negative sides, or even saying, okay, you're not really helping because you're just complaining about the situation. So The idea here is that we, as a humanism, we should focus on the human value, and that of course we need to be open. So we have a complex problem, we need to be open-minded. So there is no way we are doing that with some kind of ideas that we are carrying for a long time and just applying bluntly on reality. So what it is really kind of a definition of that, and please, I will do some examples afterwards, but please keep in mind that planetary humanism is not a term that you see, like if you search online, etc., you not find, or you find many different things. So this is kind of a working title that I just got because those elements here you kind of identify from different places, but they do have this idea behind it. So first of all, redefines us within Earth. So here I won't be talking about Earth system, but you can really say anything as long as you are thinking about the planet. It integrates scientific and philosophical perspectives. It's not something necessarily coming from one side or the other, and it's really about knowledge creation about the Earth. And the position of humanity within this framework is as an agent, so an agent in the agency more literal sense. So we do have potential, the power of mobilizing materials, energy towards certain goals. The goals self-serving, etc., but it could be other things. But in any case, we do have this power of doing something. And acknowledges also the significance of that impact, so that agency has double meaning here, because we can do things for that goal, but also we can do a lot of mass. So we can have the technomass completely overwhelming without any kind of consideration of its impact. And so because of that, it really encouraged the idea of stewardship, which stewardship became like more a used term right now, but the idea here behind it is really that we are within that system, and we need to just take care because we are powerful in those senses. So taking the responsibility and not saying, okay, I can just leave it be and it will be nice. So here the idea of gardeners is also behind it. Of course, it's not literally gardeners, but the idea is that if any of you actually engage in gardening, you know that if you just leave it be, you will be something that perhaps is less interesting, both for you and perhaps even for animals, etc. So you do have, so even the biodiversity of a garden can decrease if you don't put some thought about it. But the important part here is, of course, that everything, those elements, both you and whatever surrounding you, is interconnected. So just to have like a overview of those elements that I said, they fall for me into that category, but they not necessarily claim themselves to be planetary humanism. So first of all, there is this idea of transdisciplinarity. If we are actually building knowledge that goes beyond, so not in dialogue between disciplines, but really goes beyond like concepts that are used in different disciplines and become more and more used among those disciplines. This kind of trend fits planetary humanism. You cannot do knowledge about the Earth by only talking about climate, only talking about economy, or only talking about social relationships, politics. You need to really integrate them into at least a common language. You can, of course, disagree on things, but the idea here is they need to be understandable to each other. And also this, importantly, includes humanity. So it should not ignore so forms of, if you don't want to think about, okay, it's not exactly knowledge in the scientific term, but at least it's perspectives, is also the idea of metaphor. So its creators of metaphors really comes from a lot of all kinds of literature, cinema, etc. No, we are all embedded on those elements. It's a pity that we will not have Eloise Gouvier today, but it was really an element of art and science are much more closer to each other actually than we tend to kind of characterize the two roles. And related to here, I'm not talking too much about those points here. I'm just really brushing, and I'll just talk more focus on other points. But as you probably understood from the context of metabolism, we are dealing here with a systemic understanding. So systemic understanding here really means that we are, of course, being holistic or trying to consider a certain complexity. But of course, we need to simplify in between elements, relationships. You already saw kind of examples of that approach. Very importantly, it does have this concept behind of biophysical realities. As I think Luis put it well, that there is a materialism behind here that's undeniable. So I mean, we will see other things that kind of may contradict in your head those elements, but actually, just to be understood here, planetary humanism, so you cannot think about the planet without realizing the materiality of the planet. So in the sense that there are certain elements that are undeniable of the planet, no? So of the planet, etc., everything within. And finally, one that's probably be more problematic for you later on is the idea of human intelligence and agency as part of that planetary intelligence. So we'll talk about this now. So one of very important things in epistemology position within this framework is the idea, I like to always remember the Socratic intellectualism. Some people don't really frame it in that way, but, and also the link with agnosticism, you can see that the idea is really so I'm not reading out the slide to keep a time, but the idea is really to be humble. So you don't know everything. You probably will never know everything. This is really almost like a certainty, really, we never know, but no, you never really know everything. But at the same time, knowledge is a virtue. So you shouldn't say, okay, I cannot know anything, but then just in Spanish, there is this expression, at least in Spain, that you just turn off the lights and go. So basically, there is no point. No, you could say that, okay, I cannot know those things, so I just stop and go and do something else. So here the idea is really that you need to retain the idea that knowing about things, being conscious about things has a value, is virtue in the more classical term, if you want. So the idea of being aware or conscious of the planet, so all the relationships or the systems of the planet, whatever, however you are trying to understand it, being aware of more of it has a virtue, has a value on its own. And of course, this position is really, I think is important to emphasize because it really leaves the tolerance and the open-mindedness there. So if you take out other intellectualist positions, you actually will be more surely excluding, I don't know, certain forms of even thinking, discourse, etc. So I think it's important to be integrative in this way. Multi-causality ontology, we already mentioned the system, the idea of, well, we need a total thing that has parts integrated to it. When we talk about modeling, I will show some examples, but the idea here is that we're recognizing that things are complex as long as you are looking into it properly, both small and large. And the idea, of course, in relation to the planet is that we are part of a system that is the planet. So there's no way of denying that. We cannot conceptualize us in that perspective as just something here, I take it, I use it, and I leave it. There is no position possible in material terms, in empirical terms, etc. It, of course, emphasizes the interconnectedness, and here it also connects, this is not a topological interconnected, it is a process interconnected, so it does transverse space-time. We're not talking about a static situation. And I like to always highlight the idea that we are in holism, we actually have three interpretations of holism that are relevant within a framework like that. It's the idea that the cosmological, and here is really the most metaphysical side, if you want, is the simple thing that everything that you can interact with will be in the same whole that you. So basically everything, so you cannot observe anything that is outside your whole. Basically, this is like abstract, it comes from very ancient philosophy already, and you can just see every time in many places. So basically, it's a logical idea, of course. It really relies on logic, but it's also empirical in the sense that you basically cannot observe something if it's not in some interaction with you. Ecological sense, this is what connects perhaps more with the sustainability discourse, is the idea that all life on Earth is really interconnected. So, and in that sense, it's not even about domestic animals connected to us or the crops, etc. It's actually literally the microorganism right now in top of your table. So everything, all those elements are physically interconnected. So all the materials are being exchanged, etc. Energy. So in terms of metabolism, they are connected. And finally, because we are all doing this kind of modeling perspectives, it's very important also that the mathematical and representational side of being holistic is that you are thinking in terms of the system theory, complex system. So we are thinking in terms of feedback loops. We touched this topic with the idea of basically acceleration of certain processes with cities from Luis. Non-linearity, so things that are basically not always changing the same way, and uncertainty in the sense that, well, because we don't know everything about that system, we can define it, but still we know that we don't know everything. We need to account for uncertainty. And key concepts here, and I'm not defining them, so you can kind of search for it. But some of the other presentations already mentioned, autopoiesis, but also dissipative structures by Prigogine is kind of in the core or the origin, a lot of those things. And here, perhaps a bit less connected with social sciences, is collective autocatalysis. It's a very interesting point from chemistry. So actually Prigogine coming from chemistry, but the idea here is that, there is something interesting happening in terms of interactions, not only has like a simplistic black box with input and output. So it goes very well in the line of what was said before. And here's perhaps the most, I wouldn't say problematic, but I think it would be shocking and very hard to understand. And I added last minute yesterday a few examples later. So teleonomy, if you're not a biologist, you probably never heard about this. And this is just kind of saying, okay, we see certain things in nature. Nature here, always thinking of life initially, is the idea that we kind of interpret automatically. So we cannot basically write a sentence without implying that it has an intentionality behind. So for example, animal behavior is the application immediate in this case, and there is a whole problem of, is the animal actually cognitive enough to kind of intend something in his behavior or in her behavior? So basically you can imagine a microorganism even, so you know that there is no cognition in terms of neurons, etc. So this very basic reactive situation. And it still behaves like a purpose, no? So it has a purpose movement, if you want. So all those processes, and here I put examples both from life and, if you want, inorganic relationships that kind of give us this impression that things just go in a purpose. And the idea here in biology is that, of course, they are very uncomfortable saying that things had a kind of intelligent design behind it. And it was neat, the idea that, okay, how you explain it? You explain by mechanisms, and in biology, especially the Darwinian selection, etc. All those mechanisms, they are mechanistic, but still they give a result at the end, an aggregated result that feels like, that there was a design for that. So functional organs, for example, etc. And on the other side, panpsychism, and there are like many kind of different schools, and I'm not saying all of it, but basically here's that the mentality is in everything, and this you see mostly in physics. So a lot of even best-selling books, people doing a lot of theoretical discussions in those terms. But here I'm being very conservative in that sense. I'm just saying in physics, the idea of information lying on the fundamental side of matter So that matter is actually not substantial as we had perhaps in Aristotelian conception of matter. This is more and more being recognized as something, yeah, basically from quantum physics to general relativity, it's behind everything. So it's really almost right now, even if it's theoretical, it's a consensus. So combining those two together actually gives us this idea that intelligence, of course, I'm not talking about how a brain or a neural system work, but intelligence in the sense that things go a certain way. In that definition here, you can see the idea of learn, understand, to deal with new or trying situations. You can think about, well, what the rain does in the roof. No, it goes, well, because of gravity, etc. You can explain in mechanistic terms, but the aggregate behavior of everything, it has a certain intelligence. So both the roof and the water has this kind of information aspect of it that allows it. And this connects with the dissipative structures that I hope that at least we are teasing you enough, those that never heard about it, to kind of look on what it is. And I don't really have time to, and perhaps Mario will have more on that later. So, and in that sense, of course, life is intelligent. So it fits that description. And it's not only as was said before, it's not only about a category. So it's not talking about life, not life, etc. But actually that life is a gradient in quality in that sense. So it has more intelligence than matter that's not alive. And especially in terms that life is composed by not life matter. No? So this perhaps without the biological perspective is not so visible. And here I'm not going over the detail itself, but just for you to understand what I mean here, and not me, but this framework really, is that you can go from a gradient in complexity, and here is the information is the important part really. So the structure between those atoms actually create very different behavior later on with other atoms, so the interactions between them. And you have from small, the oxygen we are all using right now. It's a very important molecule, but it's a simple molecule. You have complex molecules like sucrose, which are for storage of energy. So it's the most basic storage of energy in biomass. Then you have autocatalytic molecules, so molecules that actually have some kind of behavior, if you want. So then you can think about the telenomy. So here you have a molecule that in certain conditions do certain things, go through certain changes and kind of facilitate it kind of the next generation of that molecule. So in the sense, more molecules, and so that's the autocatalytic process. Then you have more complicated things when you start having more information in that structure. So you have metabolic pathways, which is still kind of linear. So you have certain conditions input, certain conditions output, you have a process, but then you start having things like metabolic cycles, which here I put an example of the most kind of textbook and simple ones. And you can see that, yes, simple ones for very geek chemistry, perhaps, but not for most of us. And this is even is not even the entirety of what's happening in our cells. No? So basically you can understand how that gradient happens. And just for understanding the information aspect of it, this is an example I really like from chemistry and physics, the idea of chirality, that just having the same thing in a mirror position, it can create completely different interactions. So you have that case of these molecules, one version of the molecule. So if you know a bit of chemistry or in terms of how the molecule relates, so how the atoms are connected there, they do have more or less stable structure, and that is what permits them to interact with the other molecules. And chirality actually has this consequence of having, so one mirror is a drug for curing a disease, for actually copper poisoning, and the other one is a toxin that just suppress the metabolism of vitamin B. So basically you have completely different reactions in your body out of a slightly difference for us in terms of information. So all of this to this perspective to highlight that we are part of that. So we are kind of a. I don't like the word culmination of, in the sense that we are like in the top of the, in the peak of the process, but it's actually that we are, at least to our knowledge, we are quite good at it. So you have, come on, how much information you have in your phone, and you are connected actually to people all around the world through that phone. So you do have this aspect that we cannot deny. We are really good at this. The idea here is that, so this is actually a value that is behind everything. So in the sense of why we should value humans in this kind of complex system, life is so complex and diverse and has so much potentiality. Why the hell we are valuing humans? So humans sometimes are even more boring than other animals. So here is the idea that we actually we are power of the planet itself. So we are part of that system, and we are actually a feature. It's like saying, okay, if I take your arm from your body, that makes a difference. And in our case, we are part of that system. Take the humans, you take something of value for the planet. In that note, so planetary humanism is really very pragmatic. So the idea here is that to emphasize that there are certain things that are just more important than others. And this, I think, we perhaps don't really recognize, because of course we all has smaller problems in our heads, and from the more personal to the political, etc., and very important problems. But it's also true that if we actually want to take care of the planet in a way, we really need to just account for those other problems. And of course, this might actually help us to be more united about it. So I put this citation here, the quote from one astronaut, and is the first American in space, but you could literally take almost everyone that went to space and they will say very similar things, depending on the background, cultural background, and the kind of ideas that they have about what's actually happening in the planet. But I think the sentiment is very clear, is that, come on, why we are doing this and that, and I think this is an important note for planetary humans. And just for you to understand, of course, I'm giving here some brush strokes about it, but there is a lot of diversity that will fall among this framework, from people focusing on race, gender, up to kind of almost techno-utopian or new age, of course, and that's undeniable. So if have been sounding like new age, yeah, it is kind of new age, but it is also still kind of hippie, is still kind of etc. You could go, because I think even at least in Greek antiquity, you could have some groups that will fit also the same description. And I personally am kind of a fan of Carl Sagan in many senses, because basically is a symbol in that point where you actually have a whole movement of ecology, of planetary humanism, that was kind of silent, like silenced by the situation. So I think it was a pity moment for both science and philosophy and culture. Here's another strange person within this framework, and I really searched for that quote and the background of the quote, and it was really kind of funny how there's two versions of that quote, and the two versions are from Iceland, and this one is actually used for consolating someone that lost a person. Okay, so briefly about human predicament, I will really almost skip that part, but because I think we talked enough about that. But basically that, we are talking about the Anthropocene as you want to define it, but in any case, you saw the material consequences of whatever is happening, and the urgent need to actually do something about it. Sorry. An important point here is something that actually doesn't come up so often in social sciences, the idea that we actually are, as a planet, in existential risk. And of course, the most obvious one is climate change that we are causing ourselves. So there is this kind of short-term risks that we have of catastrophe destruction or degradation, perturbation. But we also have the other side, things that can actually just happen quite randomly, and they can completely wipe out either a planet or at least us. So this, of course, sometimes is framed as, oh, those people want to kind of be concerned about things that are very unlikely to happen, or spend money on it, resources, etc. But it's actually the thing that unites us, because even climate change, of course, will affect us very differently. But yeah, a supernova will just wipe our existence out of Earth, and probably mammals. So basically, the idea here is that, of course, we need to deal first with what we are actually doing. And this is related to the fossil fuel dependency. We have the risk and opportunities of that. So we also need to kind of remember ourselves that we have been doing stuff with those fossil fuels. And just a note here about astrobiology, you have a lot of things there that you can look at in that sense. So trying to think about the planet itself as a civilization. Perhaps the word for humanities is not the most fitting one, but it's still the ideas that humanity has a whole in the planet. And yeah, I'm not mentioning the great filter here, but this is very much related to the idea that, yeah, we need to survive somehow certain things. No? So here is just a bit of note that I think is a concept that's kind of useful for us here, the idea of age of exuberance and post-exuberant era. And it's, of course, related to the fossil fuel exploitation. The fact, I think it came up kind of implicitly in several presentations, the fact that we will not be doing what we are doing without fossil fuels in the game. And this is kind of, yeah, it's invisibilized. I think Nora is already not here, but yeah, in the museums, for example, you could see that we just ignore because we are exuberant. And here, exuberance, I'm always relating to Louis XIV and RuPaul. This kind of image of just, like being happy, being like just lashing, but at the same time, you're kind of ignoring the reality there. No? So this is the important point. And here, I'm just also showing a bit of glimpse of, okay, go towards if you want art, or in this case, also art entertainment, and you have things that are actually mirroring quite well what they actually have been doing. And this is from the 90s, this video game. You see here, there's this citation of false quote of a character that is the capitalist one, and really saying something that, okay, yeah, this is actually what people kind of say, but try not to say, no? So is the fact that, well, who cares really in some, especially in one generation in the future, what happens? Yeah, just skipping, you probably heard about this idea of overshoot and overcoming the capacity of the planet. So model thinking, and I'm reaching really my my point of the questions even. So all those things you can handle by very simplistic models, grow models, which are basically one equation that try to describe growth. Doesn't even matter what's happening behind it. It's an equation that's normally quite focused on the mathematics of it. And the idea here is that you have parameters, so things affecting the behavior of that curve, and the idea, okay, how you can actually sustain and probably try to make it reach a higher level and stay there. And from that perspective, you do have quite a variety of models, but especially corresponding to the overshoot idea here, you have the behavior of, the red line here is kind of the consumption of resource, but then kind of gets exhausted or less available, etc. So it doesn't literally disappear, but it just becomes harder and harder to get. Here you have an example of whale oil data, and you can really see this Hubbard curve. Of course, there is always issues on the things of how you interpret those things and even how you model mathematically. But in any case, you can kind of grasp for all of you that if you're not doing models, just to understand how that can help you or not to understand the process. And the overshoot idea is really that, no, once you are here and your top was actually here, the sustainable top, you just go down and you go down, behind the idea of overshoot is the idea that you go down strong. So you don't go down adjusting like other engineering systems we have to just adjust very quickly. Another example, a bit more complex models, you have Lotka-Voltaire, and this is the classical, so it's not even kind of what people in ecology really does. But for you to understand the idea that with a bit more of complexity, you already have cycles of this kind of overshoot possible, where you have a boom of population, then you crash, and then you recover, and then you crash again, etc. Because you have this intrinsic instability in the system where you only have, so you have predator-prey, so the predator only preys in one prey, and the prey is only predated by one predator. So basically you have this kind of one-one relation, which never really happened in ecology, but it gives you the idea that why biodiversity, for example, is important. This had been related to archaeology, especially with the idea of collapse of complex systems by Tainter. You have this kind of idea of domino effect. So things are so related that once you have certain things failing, you just have an effect that kind of goes throughout the whole system. But the idea here is there is some kind of tuning of that dynamics that are not still quite right. For example, there is some work by Bardi on the Seneca effect, what he calls the Seneca effect, what they told as like the going down hard, no? So the idea that you just don't adjust in a mathematical model, you could just literally just go towards the carrying capacity. The idea here is that, yeah, in many cases, you actually have things going worse because they are already worse, no? So you have this kind of feedback loop where it feeds the problems. And the idea of this kind of carrying capacity as the kind of maximal population that is sustainable is really a theoretical amount. So it's not something that we should take into, has a single value. So in this point, and I just mentioned this and had to skip the others, but the idea very important for understanding Earth in that sense is that if we try to model a bit more complex things, we start seeing that, well, we can actually model things that are autopoietic, that can sustain themselves. You already saw that the equations are not like that. They are really just solving something. If you model in a quite different way, you get things that are a bit more interesting and more realistic in the sense of representing those interactions. Here you just have an example of this idea applied in community ecology, where you actually literally have the networks of interactions between populations of a species going together. So they are feeding each other in terms of one is the resource of the other, etc. With the sun has the big input towards the system. And of course, some externality of the sedimentation, if you want, of the animal, etc. So you have things going out of the system. And you can see here that the dynamic, what you actually see in mathematical models when you go in that direction is that it's much more stable than those kind of fluctuation things that actually normally happen in problematic situations and not and is not in like if you want equilibrium or at least a stable complex system. This is related to the individuality of us. So as I mentioned before, you have microorganisms in your table that you are separated by it, but not really. So you are all interacting with it. And we have this going through many areas. You have the work by the Gaia hypothesis and the defenders of it, and it evolved quite a lot from the beginning. But also you have the work by Margulis, specifically with symbiotic. And this is an example of myself here on domestication. And is an example one by one. So two types of things, humans and certain plants. And just by interacting them in a certain way, you can already see that they can be resources to each other and actually boost each other. And this boost is not costless. This is like the reading behind that, both in human and the natural environment, that is not necessarily costless. This is the example from the Gaia theory. You have daisy words, and here it's touching more the agent-based model perspective or modeling. You actually are able to model the process of natural selection applied in this idea of intelligence of a whole system, so that the system adapts depending on the sun radiation in this case, and the daisies of that planet, the toy planet, are actually changing colors to kind of reject too much heat or absorb enough heat. So you have this kind of dynamic in this model. It's of course a toy model, but kind of wants to represent what they were actually seeing in microbiology in the oceans. I will skip that. This is a very interesting part, but Gianpietro will touch more about it. Have some examples of that. And paradigm shift models is the idea that, well, we do have fossil fuels, we are doing things with it, we will probably run out of it, run out of other things also, but we kind of have the opportunity of using it for something to find a better way. After that is gone, can you imagine medieval Europe actually thinking about sustainability? I mean, if you think about it, it will be very hard to actually do it. Yeah, and this is also just to mention, there are certain strategies we can take to actually put that framework in work or in more work than is already now. And those frameworks or those strategies are not cost-led at all. So they do have sacrifices, they do have things that are problematic that should work on. But you have the idea that our ecological community are actually part of it is completely ignored. I like this silverfish idea because this is an animal that doesn't hurt us at all. So it's all around our buildings, but we actually actively pursue to kill it. We have industry for just kill those animals from the buildings, but they're actually not doing so much harm. You have the things like caries, which is plaguing us since prehistory, but at the same time, we are not even thinking about, oh, what if we can actually make that microorganisms evolve with us to actually coexist with us instead of spending a lot of resources and energy on trying to combat it or fight it against it. And the another idea is that actually there is a potential, of course it's more, if you want, futuristic, but it's still quite possible in our grasp. The idea that we can actually think about planetary scale projects right now to solve certain things. And yeah, that possibility we shouldn't really just ignore thinking about, oh, this is now the millionaires project. We should make it planetary and not mask projects, for example. So yeah, that's my conclusion. I'm sure that some of you will be shocked that I'm talking about this because I'm working in archaeology normally, but hopefully it was interesting.